throughout the 2 years I've been in Tonga, I saw a lot of death among young men, be it from drunk driving, be it from brawls,
Yeah,
suicide happened all the time, and it was just like it was rampant. You know what I mean? If Tonga has a population of 100, I think there were
thousand.
100,000,
Yeah,
125,000
yeah,
people between that, and you're having this many suicides a year. You're
hmm,
having this many, you know, deaths as a result to, drug overdose or,
yeah,
or alcoholism or
yeah,
fighting. That's huge. Like, and come to find out later that the Pacific has 3 times the suicide rate
yeah.
of the
Of the
world
world, of the
average
world. Yeah, I remember that.
of,
Yeah,
of youth suicide, particularly youth
yeah. The
suicide.
youth. Yep, the youth. Yeah,
And that was like, so I saw that happen, and it was just like, wow, this is crazy. Like, I was in Vava'u, I was only there for 3 months, and there was like 5 deaths on this little island, and the population of Vava'u was like 14,000, small.
yeah.
5 deaths in 3 months, and it's all young men. Not to say it doesn't happen with young women a lot, but predominantly, like, come to find out in other studies, like 90% of the suicide is men down there.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's usually the same consensus all around the world. So there's a majority of men
is it?
who
Oh, okay,
commit
okay.
suicide, even in the U.S.
Oh, okay, okay. Um, so while I was there, I was having dinner with a local guy, and he was actually he lived up in Utah. He went to Provo High, the same high school I went to, 10, 20 years before me. And he had a family now, and I really admired the way his children behaved. Like, he had some
Yeah.
of the most kind, respectful. There's like the respectful, like, you have to do it or you're gonna get a hiding respectful, and then there's
Okay.
like the respectful, like, just genuinely, like, they were just genuinely happy kids, very respectful, very polite. But they still had fun. They would still laugh. And he just had like a very happy family. And I admired him that, and I was like, I want to have a family like this guy. So I'd ask him, I was like, hey, do you hit your kids? Like, do you do like, I would just, what kind of like parenting techniques do you use? Because like someday I want to be a father, and I want my kids to I want to replicate this feeling that you have in your home.
Yeah.
So I admired him a lot as a man. And then he asked me once if I was a Boy Scout, and I was like, yeah, I did scouting. I got my eagle and everything, because he loved when he was up here in America, he was in Boy Scouts and he loved
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And then he asked me, he's like, will you come back to Vava'u and help me start the Boy Scouts here? And
Yeah.
at the time, I was 20 years old. I didn't know anything about anything. I
Yeah.
didn't know how to start a Boy Scout, organization or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, that would be really cool, but I didn't think about it. But then when I was here, when I was in Hawaii, thinking about changing my major and what I could do with it, I remember that conversation. It replayed in my head,
Hmm.
and it was almost like it was like a revelation at the time, that like it was kind of like my whole life, even though
Yeah.
like I'm very much into my culture and my people. Um, I've always been connected to Tongans.
All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Kava Club podcast, where we share healthy conversations, apply knowledge, experiences, and stories to promote happiness, love, success. You guys already know who I am. My name is Will. I'm the host of this show. If you guys watching this for the first time, if you guys tuning in, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Please show some love and support. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Everybody out there that's been watching, please subscribe to my channel. Please showing me so much love and support. Thank you so much, Alfatu. Thank you. Really appreciate all the love and support. It really inspires me to keep going. But I am very excited today, y'all. I'm very excited today. I have a very special guest to one of our brothers all the way from Utah. And please don't judge me when I say this, okay? Don't judge me. It's been a while. I do want to give him a big introduction. He is the Ngahauoma Fakatoukatea, Fakatoutea to Lord Fulivai. He probably can say a lot better than me.
That's good, man. You got it.
Very excited. I just want to say directly to him, thank you so much for the opportunity joining me on my show, joining me on this podcast. I'm very excited for him to share his life story with all you guys. But I'll allow him to introduce himself real quick. So it's all you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Will, for having me. I wish, to give you my respect at the same time, um, giving respect to those that came before us and to God. And as this is probably going to be a conversation around a lot of things Tongan or in that manner, I'd like to give my respect to the Hawaii, the chiefs, and those who have been curators of the Tongan culture, which I have been blessed to be included in some aspects. So thank you. I'm excited to be here. I like your content. I love, and I appreciate the messages of positivity that you strive to share and trying to find that in everybody that you talk with. So yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, so just I guess kind of recap over my life. Some aspects of this may be repeats from other podcasts, and then there may be some that's unique to whatever podcast that you go into. For those of you who don't know, you could check out Village Made podcast by Vava'u. He talks also a lot about kind of my life story. So I don't know how much of what I covered in there I'll cover in here, but just if anybody wants to learn more about that, they can check that out. But let's see, I was born in Provo, Utah. Cameron Van Wagoner, two very hardworking parents that I love very much. I spent my life growing up in Utah. I was very outdoorsy, participated in football in high school. Was also big into snowboarding, horseback riding. Pretty much loved all things cowboy. And I was a huge. So I grew up on a small farm lot. Spent a lot of time, gardening. We planted gardens. I worked with my father from a very young age, doing different sort of gardening and landscaping projects. And that was kind of my early years. We weren't rich by any means, and we were like looking. I always felt like we were really, really poor, but then looking back, I realized like there's a difference between being poor and being broke.
Of course.
And while we were probably broke for the most of my life, we were never poor because my parents did work very hard, and they've achieved so much from having so little. And so looking back at it, I realized that while we didn't have a lot of money per se, that we did have a lot of value, in family. I grew up on a big piece of property, which is a blessing not a lot of people here in America have. I had that 4 acre playground where I could go play in the dirt and sticks and all that kind of stuff. And then, I was also blessed to learn how to work from a very young age, which I hated at the time, of course, but it has been a huge blessing in my life. So that's kind of younger years when and growing up, I also, my best friend growing up, a close friend when I was about 10, 11 years old, was a Hawaiian kid. There was a family from Hawaii. They shared their house bordered our property line. And so I was very close with him, and through him, I became acquainted with, Polynesian culture and things like that, which I always loved and appreciated. And then in high school, I became, very close with a Tongan family from Hawaii.
Okay.
And kind of like, very, I was just close. I mean, I had a lot of, I had white friends too. I had my redneck friends. We had bonfires and blew stuff up and did all the fun white people stuff. But I grew up also around, different Polynesian groups, particularly Tongans, is who I got really close to. And I also grew up as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, commonly known as Mormons, right? And so growing up, I always looked forward to when I would serve a 2-year mission. And because of movies like The Other Side of Heaven, because of my friendship with Tongans, I always wanted to serve in Tonga. But you don't actually choose where you go. And so I didn't think I'd actually get to serve a mission there. And so I found out about an opportunity to go on a youth service trip to Tonga. So I went there when I was 17 for 2 weeks. And that was the first time, I got to go down there. And then I came back, I graduated high school,
Yeah.
and I put in the application to serve a full-time mission for 2 years. And I was lucky enough or blessed enough to get called to go back to Tonga.
Oh, okay.
And so I served a 2-year mission in Tonga, all over the islands. I started in Tongatapu, went to Ha'apai, went up to the Niuas, and then I finished from Vava'u. And so, I was lucky enough to be able to see, in short periods, a few months at a time, life, not only, in Tongatapu, but across all of the different island groups.
Yeah.
So that was the experience in and of itself was an amazing blessing, but at the same time, there's also so many things you learn from a mission that can't really be learned anywhere else. And so that was amazing, both for the personal development aspects of it, and being able to just learn how to love and different things like that, but as well as that adventure experience of taking 2-day boat rides or doing different things that kind of sparked a lot of my curiosity and questions.
I want to ask you because I know you're going to talk about your life story, how you're very deep rooted in the culture. And I know that's a story that people are going to hear later on. Because I want to ask you, because you grew up, the normal white people life, right? But when you finally went, I'm just interested in, for myself. But when you went to Tonga and saw that way of life and actually getting to know the Tongan life, the Tongan people, what stood out to you that you just realized this is the first thing you noticed when you met Tongans that was different, that you've never seen before growing up as a child? I'm just interested to hear that.
So as a child, previously to ever going to Tonga, when I became close friends with my Tongan friends, I spent a lot of time over there, slept over to their house all the time. What stood out to me the most was I guess it'd be called a sense of community, like communal ownership, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So it's what's like there's shirts and there's shoes and there's beds, but it's not someone's bed. Like, it was always funny. Like, it was never go to your room, it's go to the room. Like, it was interesting paying attention to the language of it. Like, the older sister would never say it's in my car, it's in the Tahoe, or it's never my. There's no possessive pronouns in there, which is really interesting. And just that giving aspect, which is it's not foreign to me, growing up, like, in my Western, I guess, like, there's Western, like, European, American, like, descendants of Europe. But then when I say Western, I mean, like, Western United States, farming, cowboy kind of culture stuff is what I grew up in. And in that Western U.S. culture, and again, like, country, I guess country, it would be the better word for it. So, like, that country culture is, you'd give the shirt off your back to someone in need, and service is a huge thing. And I grew up with that. Like, my father was huge on service. Like, we'd be out landscaping or whatever, we'd be coming home at 7:00 at night. And if we drove past someone's house and they were out raking leaves, especially, like, there were some widows in the area or some single women or things like that, my dad would pull the truck over, give me I would grab a rake and grab a bucket out of the back of the truck, and he's like, okay, I'll go dump this load and I'll come back and pick you up. And so that was a very common thing, like, mowing your neighbor's lawn, shoveling. It's like constantly serving other people was a culture that I was raised with. And so becoming, like, getting closer to Polynesians and stuff, that aspect of giving materially was kind of like added on to that. So, and I like that. I really liked how, giving they were, how accepting they were. Again, I kind of have this joke, like, Tongans love to adopt stray white kids. And it's not like I wasn't, like, homeless or stray or anything, but it's just like they were very, inclusive. They were very excited to teach me about their culture. And like, and then there were different learning curves, like, and things that I had to get used to, but then also things that, that I appreciated. And I think that aspect of giving was big, is what stood out to me first, because I grew up in a culture where and we would, if someone needed money or anything, yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
but I grew up in a very service oriented culture.
Yeah.
And I think that the giving aspect and the not being very like materially possessiveness, I don't know if I'm using the right terms or not, but I
Yeah.
think that played in well, and I appreciated that. So I was actually happy, like, when I got the opportunity to give something away. Like,
Yeah.
after I learned about it, it's like it made me happy. It's like, oh yeah, that's my shirt, but you wear it. Like, you take that shirt, kind of thing. Because it was just like, this is cool. Like, I don't have to worry, about that kind of stuff or whatever. But
Yeah.
so that was initially, like, that's what stood out to me. And then just the like sense of humor was a big
Oh,
thing.
yeah, the Tongan
Yeah.
Polynesian humor.
Yeah, and it's just like, I mean, like, we, young, and I don't know what it was like for, I imagine it's pretty similar to most Polynesian kids in Utah, but like, as young kids, we would have our own little fight kavas, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Or sometimes we would go and like sit on the outskirts of the OG fight kavas, and it was just like the laughing and sense of humor and taufahi, you know what I mean? Like sometimes I was just like, especially when you're new to it, you're like, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, like, you guys are tearing that guy apart, but he's just laughing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that can go too far, even in Tongan circles and
Yeah.
Tongan contexts. But just being able to have a good sense of humor and laugh about things and have fun almost always was something I really appreciated.
Yeah, I want to ask you because that's something it's very hard for me to explain the Polynesian humor to people that's outside the Polynesian community, right? Because so for you, I want to ask you, like, if you had to like simplify like what Polynesian humor is, anybody that's watching this that may not know what it is, because it's really really hard for me to transcribe it into words. And I always think it's something you just gotta feel it out. It's something you just experience.
Yeah, I think it's hard to describe, because I mean, there's some aspects of it could like border, like, some people would see it as like abuse, either verbally
Yeah.
or physically. Like,
Yeah.
so we love like those like slap someone while they're sleeping videos, and it's just like, that's it's not very nice, you know what I mean? But I don't know. Yeah, I would have a difficult time.
What I always
describing
tell people, it's not for the faint of heart. That's all I say. That's all I say. You have a weak heart. You just
the cardinal sin with Polynesian humor is being fialahi, having pride, being prideful and stuck up.
Yeah.
If you are a proud person in the aspect like vain or stuck up at all, you're not going to survive.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they do it. I think that's why it happens, because it's to teach you, hey, take yourself so seriously. Be humble, learn to laugh at yourself, learn to laugh at, just learn to laugh and have fun, and don't get angry. The biggest thing, the worst thing you could do when someone's fighting you is get mad, because they'll do it more.
They'll do it more
because it's funny.
You're just encouraging it.
Yeah, it's like if someone makes fun of you and you just kind of laugh and go along with it, like, okay, yeah, we had fun with that guy. But if someone makes fun of you, and this is all just my experience and my viewpoint, but if someone makes fun of you and you get like angry, it's not gonna stop.
Yeah,
and they're just gonna keep pushing you and pushing you and pushing you to see what you'll do. So yeah, that's
If anybody's watching this and if you're around Polynesians and they make fun of you, the best thing to do is just be emotionless. If they see any kind of emotion within you, especially anger, that's just a sign for them to double down. Down. That's
just be jovial. Laugh. Like, even if you're just sitting, I mean, if you're sitting there quiet, they may be like, oh yeah, no, they'll still come at you because they think you're angry, they think you're brooding and just holding it in.
Yeah.
Again, not all people are like this, not all Tongans are like this. They're not like one size fits all, but that's kind of the general experience.
They're just looking for that chicken in the arm.
And it's and like there's a purpose behind it, and that's what I mean. there's a lesson, and it's
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
take yourself too seriously. But
Do you have experience where that they got to you? That they got to you?
oh, guaranteed. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. I don't know. I can't think of any in particular. I grew up around a cool group of guys. Like I was
Yeah.
lucky. I almost got thrown through a window once, but that wasn't that was someone else got clowned on and they thought it was me and they got mad at me. But it was, but like, and the person who's doing it he's one of my favorite people too.
Yeah.
Nothing against him. He's just the younger kid in our group and he took a lot of flack. Yeah, in particular, I don't have anything off like the top of my head. I know there's times, or like sometimes even I get mistaken. Like one time we were playing volleyball when I was in Vava'u as a missionary.
Yeah.
And I was sick. Like I was, whatever it was, like I felt like I was gonna throw up. And so I was just like, okay, like I'm just gonna try to get home. And so I was kind of like walking fast. So I was like, because I didn't want to like throw up on the side of the road or anything like that. And I was sweaty. I was probably pale. I didn't look good. And then my companion, because everywhere you go as a missionary, you go with someone else. He was kind of like a little ways behind me. And I was just like, so long as we're in sight or whatever, which looks really bad. Like you never want to like, if you're with someone, you never want to not be next to them because then people in Tonga, they're like, oh, they're fukuloto. You know what I mean? They're they hate each other right now. And so I walked past a lady and I was like, I kind of like Fakatoutea, like I was like kind of like acknowledged her, but it was really brief because I was like, I felt like I was dying kind of thing. And then she says to the guy behind me, to my companion, she's like, like she just thought I was pissed off and storming away. And I didn't say anything. I was like, nah, whatever. Like, I don't care. I'm worried about bigger things right now. But like, it's very... Yeah, it's apparent. And I'm trying to remember. I'm sure if you talk to people who know me, like, he did this, or he did that.
Yeah.
Especially because I was a very serious missionary, which doesn't go over well a lot. But yeah, nothing off the top of my head.
It's all good. So you served your mission, and then you came back. And what happened next?
So I came back to Utah, and then right after that, I moved down to Hawaii. I got accepted into BYU Hawaii, but it was getting too cold in Utah, so I was like, I'm gonna get down there. Because I came back in like September, and it's October. I think I moved down there in November.
Yeah.
October. And I actually stayed with the Tongan family that I grew up with because they were from Hawaii.
Okay.
And then I went to BYU Hawaii, and originally I was an education major.
Okay.
Because I was like, what do I want to do with my life? And I realized I wanted to help kids realize their potential.
Yeah.
Because growing up my whole life, I don't know why, but my whole life I thought I was going to do construction or I was going to work in my dad's, landscaping business, which there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I didn't ever realize that I could change my path if I wanted to. Or that I could, I could invent things. Like I could, you know what I mean? I could do something that could change the world.
You just wanted to be yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, I realized, I don't know why, but I didn't realize that as a kid. I was like, I want to help young people realize their potential and fulfill it. Like and I actually love construction. I love working outdoors. I love landscaping.
Yeah.
And so that I don't look down on anybody who does any of those sorts of things. I prefer them. But I know that there are a lot of people who would rather do something else, but they just don't feel like they have a choice.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm gonna be a science teacher because I want to. And also, I loved Hawaii. I loved riding horses. So I was like, if I'm a teacher, I can have summers off to whereas I can go ranch and whatever.
Ride horses.
And I'm a cowboy. Yeah. And there's actually a really big cowboying culture in Hawaii. And Hawaii, people were telling me when I was in school, they really needed math and science teachers. And so I was like, oh, cool, I'll be a science teacher. That way I can help kids succeed in life. Mm-hmm. And again, like teaching was just the method of it. Like, I don't really care if you care about science or care about math, but I care about you realizing that you can go far in life and achieve whatever your dreams are.
Yeah.
So originally that's why I started out. That was the plan. I was like, I was gonna go live in Molokai or go live in like Lanai, just like the little, cowboy islands out there, maybe big islands, you know what I mean? I was gonna teach. And then summers I was gonna farm and ranch. And so while I was doing that, I took a Hawaiian studies class. As a part of being a teacher in Hawaii, you have to take that class.
Mm-hmm.
And my professor was like, he read my papers and stuff, and he's like, you're really passionate about, the Pacific and Hawaii and stuff. I was like, I grew up with Hawaiians, I grew up with Tongans. And, due to my own upbringing in a very strong culture, like heritage was a big thing in my family. Mm-hmm. I realized that, heritage is something that can bring strength. It's empowering to know your heritage.
Yeah.
And I love, there are a lot of different things. Like one of the assignments we did, it was like, you had to draw your genealogy, and I drew mine as like drew a picture of myself standing and then roots. Mm-hmm. Or draw your family tree is what it was. Yeah. And so it's like most people, the tree goes up, but for me, I had the tree go down into the ground because that's how I always viewed it. Is like, that's my roots. Like, they're not here. You can't see them. I mean, they're literally in the ground, but like, that's my foundation. Yeah. That's what holds me and stuff. And so in that class, the teacher, he was like, you need to study. And he was probably just recruiting for his department. Not to say he wasn't genuine. I think he was a very genuine, good professor, but he was like, hey, you should study Hawaiian studies or Pacific Island studies. And I was just like, that sounds like, I mean, no offense to any of your degrees, but there's degrees out there that you hear the name of the degree and you're just like, that almost sounds useless. And
or sound broke.
Yeah. That's the kind of degree, like, you don't live with your parents, and like it's a Ngahauoma degree. That's like a
yep.
And so I was just like, I mean, I would love to, like, of course I would love to study Pacific Island studies and, and do all this stuff. But I was like, I was like, what would I do with that?
Yeah.
And so I kind of thought on that, and he actually took me to see. So when I was a missionary, I went between all the different islands. I became very fascinated with voyaging, because like I knew that, Polynesians had been in the islands for thousands of years. Come to find out, 1,000 years before Europeans. I mean, aside from Vikings, so my ancestors had it, but like 1,000 years before Columbus left, the coast of Europe, Polynesians had pretty much found and inhabited every inhabitable island in the Pacific Islanders, not to exclude Micronesians, because they were great navigators themselves too. And Melanesians, not so much of a navigating culture, but they're still a part of that expanse.
I do want to ask you, I know this is something that I always hear from a lot of people. Do you know because I don't really know my history, that's why I'm very interested to learn from you. Do you know where we came from as far as like the origin?
Everywhere.
Okay. Okay. Yeah,
Southeast Asia is the predominant, but like I've read studies where it was saying like a third of Polynesian, so what we consider Polynesians, Hawaiian, Samoan, Tongan, like a third of their genome is found in, America, like Native American societies. There's
Native America. Okay.
Yeah, so majority-wise came from Southeast Asia. Most people think out of Taiwan, through the Philippines, through Vanuatu, out to what is now considered Polynesia. But we also, so like Kumala is from South America. The Kukuina, the Tui, that's from South America. We found South America genetics, in the Pacific as well. We found Polynesian colonies on the coast of South America.
Oh, okay.
Taro, coconut, all that, that's from Asia, right? So pretty much, like I said, like 1,000 years before Europeans left the coast, they'd already, Polynesian or Pacific Islanders had already found and inhabited every single island group, pretty much. So I think Hawaii was the last one, and it's the most secluded. But I think they were saying that one was inhabited probably around 400 AD or so. And if 1492 was when Columbus left, like, so imagine what happened that 1,000 years, people voyaging back and forth, people exploring, people trading,
Yeah.
you know, from New Zealand to Rapa Nui, Easter Island, and beyond that. Like I said, like there's evidence of them being in South America. They've gone back and forth how many times, you know, wars, there was slave trade going on, there was intermarriaging going on. And so it's like, I don't think it's far-fetched to think that there are groups of people from both sides of the Pacific.
Yeah.
Even Melanesian countries, like some of them are tracing some of that genome stuff back to Africa. Like I recently saw one chart where it showed the migration kind of out of Madagascar area up along the Indian coast, out to where, you know, Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands are now, right?
Yeah.
And so, and then that came to Fiji, and then there's a lot of mixing of Tongans and Fijians, right? So, like even, and I'm not the genetic scientist or anything, and this is just kind of my opinion.
When you said mixing with the Fijians, the first thing I thought was Kava.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah, that kind of mixing too. A lot of trade, a lot of, you know, wars. There, you know, the Lau Islands in Fiji are a big Tongan population area. Yeah, and then especially in the royal families, Fijians in Tonga have played a huge part. Okay, and even today, like there's still, you know, Fijian chiefs who are in very good relations with the Tongan royal family. Yeah. And so, yeah, so it's like Polynesians as a people, to me, came from everywhere, almost like Asia, could be from Africa. Yeah. You know, I'd have to go back and double check that, but I did see like someone had, you know, traced that back towards Africa, you know, through Fiji. There is very possibly, you know, traces of Native American, you know, DNA or ancestry in there. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, and also like, I just realized you know, we're all related because of the language. You know, some of the Samoan language, there's some words that's very similar to our Tongan language, also the Fijians as well. So it's pretty, I feel like, you know,
it's pretty cool to know. So that the language family, there's a few distinct language families in anthropology, and Polynesian languages, Tongan Samoan, they come from Austronesian. But Austronesian is also where all of, you know, the Micronesian dialects come from. It might be out of Taiwan. Maybe that's how they connected it to Taiwan. I know that there's a DNA connection to Taiwan as well. But yeah, language is a huge part too. Just, you know, everyone's kind of connected. Yeah. Everyone's essentially the same people, a few generations removed kind of thing. So.
Okay. So you talked to that teacher. He tried to give you that pitch.
Yeah. So, so back to the story. We went to see the boat. There's a Virgin canoe. It's kept at the Polynesian Culture Center in Hawaii, which is you know, connected to BYU Hawaii. And he took us to see the voyaging canoe, and as I was learning about it, I was just fascinated. And you know, I've always been I've always been very adventurous, very outdoorsy, exploring, horseback riding. You know, come to find out, like a huge part of my ancestry were Scandinavian or Viking. Yeah. So I don't know, seafaring is kind of in my blood in a way. And you know, not to mention my British colonizing ancestry as well. They sailed all around the world. But I got super into the, you know, like so when I was like between Vava'u and Niua on a boat, and if there's no clouds in the sky and the sun gets up there, but you can't really, after sunrise and sunset, it's not really much use and direction. And it's like you kind of have like dark blue and light blue, and there's nothing else. Nothing apparent, at least. Yeah. And I was just like, how in the world? Because if you're off by like 2 degrees or 3 degrees or whatever, you know, over 100 miles, over 1,000 miles, you can miss your target by hundreds of miles. Yeah. Because you keep going off in that. So if you were off just by any bit, you would miss the island you were going to. And depending on if there are any islands nearby, like you could just completely keep sailing off. Like you could miss Tonga and sail off towards Antarctica and just be gone forever. You know what I mean? Like it's mind blowing when you look at how Pacific, like, you know, historic or ancient Pacific Islanders not only found all the islands in the first place,
Yeah.
but then successfully traveled back and forth between them. You know what I mean? So I was very fascinated with that. And so when he took us to see the voyaging canoe and the experts that were talking about it and talking about navigation, I was just like, I was hooked, right? And then he comes up behind me like afterwards and he's like, like Pacific Island Studies and Hawaiian Studies majors get to sail it or whatever. And I was just like, you got me. So I was like, okay, I need to change my degree because I want to sail this boat. But what am I going to do with it?
Yeah.
And it was something I thought about a lot. And then I remembered, and it was very like, it was a pretty spiritual experience. Because I remember a conversation I had with someone in Vava'u, the last area that I served. And throughout the 2 years I'd been in Tonga, I saw a lot of death among young men, be it from drunk driving, be it from brawls, suicide happened all the time. And it was just like, it was rampant. You know what I mean? If Tonga has a population of 100, I think there were 100,000, 125,000 people between that, and you're having this many suicides a year, you're having this many, deaths as a result to, drug overdose or alcoholism or fighting. That's huge. Like, and come to find out later that the Pacific has 3 times the suicide rate.
Yeah,
the world average.
Of the world. Yeah, I remember that.
Of youth suicide, particularly youth suicide.
The youth. Yep, the youth. Yeah.
And that was like, so I saw that happen, and it was just like, wow, this is crazy. Like, I was in Vava'u. I was only there for 3 months, and there was like 5 deaths on this little island, and the population of Vava'u was like 14,000, small.
Yeah.
And 5 deaths in 3 months, and it's all young men. Not to say it doesn't happen with young women a lot, but predominantly, like, come to find out in other studies, like 90% of the suicide is men down there.
Yeah. That's usually the same consensus all around the world. So there's majority of men who commit suicide, even in the U.S.
Okay. So while I was there, I was having dinner with a local guy, and he was actually he lived up in Utah. He went to Provo High, the same high school I went to, 10, 20 years before me. And he had a family now, and I really admired the way his children behaved. Like, he had some of the most kind, respectful. There's like the respectful, like, you have to do it or you're gonna get a hiding respectful, and then there's like the respectful, like, just genuinely, like, they were just genuinely happy kids, very respectful, very polite, but they still had fun. They would still laugh. And he just had like a very happy family. And I admired him that, and I was like, I want to have a family like this guy. So I'd ask him, I was like, hey, do you hit your kids? Like, do you do, like, what kind of like parenting techniques do you use? Because like someday I want to be a father, and I want my kids to I want to replicate this feeling that you have in your home. Yeah. So I admired him a lot as a man. And then he asked me once if I was a Boy Scout, and I was like, yeah, I did scouting. I got my eagle and everything, because he loved when he was up here in America, he was in Boy Scouts and he loved it. Yeah. And then he asked me, he's like, will you come back to Vava'u and help me start the Boy Scouts here? Yeah. And at the time, I was 20 years old. I didn't know anything about anything. Yeah. I didn't know how to start a Boy Scout, organization or whatever. Yeah. Like, I didn't. Yeah. And so I was like, oh, that would be really cool, but I didn't think about it. But then when I was in Hawaii, thinking about, changing my major and what I could do with it, I remember that conversation. It replayed in my head. Mm-hmm. And it was almost like it was like a revelation at the time, that like, it was kind of like my whole life, even though like I'm very much into my culture and my people, I've always been connected to Tongans. Yeah. I learned the language. A lot of people, when I first started, they thought I was almost done because I learned the language so well. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting because I didn't think I'd go on my mission to Tonga. And after I went on my little service trip, I was like, okay, like I said a prayer when I sent in my applications. I was like, hey, look, I'll go where you want me to go. I just told God, like, I'll go where you want me to go, anywhere in the world. Like, if you want to send me to Idaho, I'll go there. Like, and so I wasn't really expecting to go back to Tonga, but, I was still taken back there. I wasn't planning on going to college. My mission president, he was like, what colleges have you applied for? I was like, I haven't applied for any.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, BYU will give you a scholarship, at least for the first semester, because you served here in the Pacific.
Yeah.
And so go apply. He pretty much he pulled me off the assignment I was on or whatever, and he sent me to go work with some people who helped me apply for college. And it turns out I didn't even know, but I didn't even finish the application. So I went home, and then I got an email saying, hey, you haven't finished your application. Do you want to finish it? And I was like, oh, okay. I just had to like click submit or whatever, right? But like I wasn't really planning on going to college. And then I was like, I had a 2-point-something GPA in high school. Like I went to high school to play football, and that's it. It's like if I could play football, I was good. Like I intentionally skipped classes because I was like, I've got an A. I could miss about 2 weeks. Like, Like, so I didn't ever plan on going back to Tonga afterwards, or even going to Hawaii. But then I got taken back to, Hawaii. And it's just kind of like, in this instance, I realized, like, like, God has given me a connection to the people. He's given me a love and a passion for it. He's given me the language, which I speak fairly proficiently. And he's led me to this place where I can learn everything I need to learn to help people. And I realized the goal I had of helping young people achieve their potential, through high school, being a high school teacher, I could do that even better by going back to Vava'u and trying to help the young people there, particularly the young men, because they're the most at risk, or apparently, but, I do have goals to help all young people there. I could help them achieve their potential by giving, just providing things. Because in Vava'u, there's no like clubs. There's no, boys and girls club or big brother, big sister stuff. There's no gyms. There's no rec centers. There's no arcades. You know what I mean? There's so little things for the youth there. And, like idle hands are the devil's playthings, and so I realized, I felt like at that time, it felt like my whole life had been preparing me to go back. To use the talents and passions that I had been given. To help this man. You know what I mean? He had a dream. He wanted to see his society thrive. He wanted to help the young men in his community. And I had, being at the university, there's a lot of great mentors, a lot of great resources. Being in America, so I had the opportunity to help him with that, to learn all that stuff that he needed help learning. And so I went and I volunteered with the scout troop there in Hawaii, as an assistant, just to learn. I went to the it's called Wood Badge training. It's the leadership training for scouting. I studied entrepreneurship at school along with my degree in Pacific Island Studies. So I learned about creating organizations. I learned about, creating sustainability. I learned all these things. I found a really skilled horseman who taught me how to train horses and, take care of horses better. Cause I loved horses, and I grew up around them and stuff, but I didn't know that stuff. And a part of that was like, I needed to make money while I was down there. So I was like, I'll start a tourist business where I do horseback rides and other things.
Okay.
And then the business would also be free for the boys, or like be available for them to come. So they could come learn horsemanship. They could learn how to do the tours. They could do all this different stuff. And so I was in a really unique position that allowed me, to go back and do something good, not only because originally I was kind of like, I wanted to help kids. But I also just kind of wanted to live a good life, which everybody does. Like everybody wants to live a good life. But in this instance, I almost felt like, I have more of a responsibility to others. And especially growing up, my dad always big on service. Living a life of service is kind of been the bit, like there's a quote that really, stuck out to me when I was younger. And it was someone saying, like, anytime in life that we feel like we are unhappy, he's like, I'm convinced that it's because we're thinking far too much of ourselves.
Yeah.
I realize that to be true. Is like the more selfless we are, the more we're worried about others' well-being, the happier we are.
Yeah.
And granted, that can be taken too far. Like, there's a lot of like, you need self-care, you need to take care of yourself and everything.
Yeah.
But there's also a science behind it. Like service, when you serve someone, there's a connection.
Yeah.
When there's that connection, that's where love comes from. That's where happiness comes from, right?
Yeah.
And so, so I decided, I was like, you know what? This is what I'm meant to do. This is what I've been prepared for, almost my whole life. So I changed my major, studied Pacific Island Studies, studied entrepreneurship, learned how to run a tourist business, learned how to run a scout program, did all this stuff, that few years I was in Hawaii. And then I graduated and things just lined up like perfectly. It was amazing. Like I was just like, I have no idea how to do this. How am I going to learn to do this? And I would like, say a prayer or whatever. And the next day it would be right there.
Yeah.
Like for example, like learning to train a horse, like where in Oahu, Hawaii, am I going to learn how to train horses? And then the next day I went and I got a job at this dude ranch doing horseback tours. Yeah. And then like shortly after getting a job there, I met someone, who knew how to do that stuff and who, I was able to develop a relationship with and learn. And so I did all that. I moved back to Tonga. At the time, the governor of Vava'u was Lord Fulivai, one of the nobles there. And I had actually met him the first time I went to Tonga. So the first time I went to Tonga, when we did a service project, he was involved in it in some kind of way. And so I went back to Vava'u. I made an appointment to meet with him. And I kind of walked in and I'm like, hey, I'm here trying to start this organization on your island. Yeah. I just wanted to let him know what was going on, pay respect, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I walked in, I had a draft of my, my plan. And I printed him just a simple 1-page draft, kind of outlining, the objectives and how I was going to do it. And he looked blown away. And then later he told me, he's like, that day you came into the office? I was like, yeah. It's like literally that morning I prayed for someone like you because he needed help for this stuff. And then he was also a father of, a teenage son and all this other stuff. So it was miraculous in a lot of ways. Like all these little coincidences that just fell into place. It was difficult too, but I went back there. So, it was difficult. I lived on my own, lived away from my family, slept on the floor in this little house that someone let me stay in, you know what I mean? And I lived there for a few years. And during that time, at first, when I went back, the governor was very friendly and he encouraged me to come over, but I didn't want to be like, oh, I'm friends with the governor kind of thing, what I mean? And maybe it was overkill, just me not wanting to be like Fiamea.
Yeah.
But so I kind of kept my distance at first just because, and there were a lot of people too that were like, oh, you should go talk to him. He'll give you land. Like you should go be his friend. You can get this from him or you can get that from him. And I didn't want to do it for that either. So I intentionally didn't really pursue a relationship with him because I didn't want it to be for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
But it was kind of inevitable. Like we became, after 6 months of being there, I actually went there for 6 months on an internship, came back, did another semester of school, finished, and then I moved back. So after that first 6 months, we ended up drinking Kava together one night. And it was just like, hey, look, I know you might leave. I know there's a lot of things that could happen. You might not come back, but I just want you to know, I appreciate what you've been trying to do out here.
Yeah.
And if you do come back, I'd appreciate that too or whatnot. And so I did, as soon as I graduated, I got the opportunity to go back, which was also kind of a miraculous thing to me because I didn't have any money or I had some money saved up for running the program, but I didn't want to spend that on flights and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I was able to, get a sponsor or actually get another job down there that paid, flew me out there. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to work through, get started on my program. And then as that kind of went along, I became closer friends with the governor. And eventually I went in and interned in his office as his personal assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And, we became really close. And we were working on a lot of like good projects and stuff that would really help the people. And during this time, after working with him so I'd known him first time I met him, I was 17, and this is, 5-6 years later.
Yeah.
And then I'd known him personally for the last couple years. And then we'd actually worked, side by side. I was his personal assistant for about a year when there was the king was having his birthday celebration up in Vava'u, which was, at that time there was like the Wesleyan Church Conference. There was all kinds of stuff going on. The military tattoo was just like this kind of 2-week, 3-week period of time where there's just all kinds of celebrations, all kinds of katoanga. And during that time, when the king, was in Vava'u, I was lucky enough to get to know some of the Matapule that are part of the Falaya Matapule, like the house of Matapule is like a talking chief, is what you'd call it in Samoan. But they're more like the craftsmen of Tonga. They keep the histories, they keep the protocols.
Okay. Yeah.
But at the same time, a lot of Matapule historically were also carvers, lashers, different craftsmen.
Yeah.
And so I was, blessed to get to know them well enough. And I've always loved legends and history and stuff like that. And so, I had the opportunity to sit down with them and listen to a lot of the legends, and they would ask me about things going on, or they knew about certain projects. There were certain things that we would, present to the king about. And so near the end of the celebrations, one of the Matapule came up to Fulivai and asked him to stand in on a ceremony where someone was receiving their title, where one of the kings, Matapule in Vava'u, was getting his title. And but Fulivai was asked to sit in as the Olovaha, or as the head of that circle.
Yeah.
And then he also said, like, I was just kind of standing there to the side, being the assistant or whatever. Like, I wasn't really paying attention. And then the Matapule, like, pointed at me and he said, "Mai moho tangata ke ato nekakawa."
Yeah.
Meaning, like, he said, like, yeah, have your guy come too, because we're going to give him a title.
Yeah.
And I was like, I kind of like heard it because I was looking around, like there's a lot going on, and I was just, I was on standby in case he needed me for anything. But then he kind of like whacked me. He's like, "Did you hear that?" I was like, "No, what?" He's like, "They're gonna give you a title," and I was like, "Oh my goodness!" Like, so I was nervous too because I mean, about like Shumway. He's probably the only Balangi, well-known Balangi who has a title. There's also the president of the PCC was given a title. A couple years, actually, while I was a student at BYU Hawaii, he got a title. But there's only, those, like, Shumway and the president were the only ones I'd known of who'd ever received a title, and they're like these grown men who have accomplished a lot. And
He caught you off by surprise. He caught you by surprise.
I was intimidated. I guess it was like I was intimidated. Because I didn't feel like I deserved one. And so, sorry, I'm losing my voice here.
You're good.
So, I didn't feel like I didn't know if I deserved one, I guess.
Yeah.
But he was just like, "Do you want it or not?" Like, and I was like, "I don't know if I'm ready." And he's like, "It's not about." The title isn't about, you don't earn a title. When you get a title, you fulfill a responsibility.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And at the same time, I didn't want, like, that's a very, very high honor.
Yeah.
And I was like, a part of me felt like I couldn't say no.
Plus, in Polynesians, you can't say no.
Yeah, exactly.
when they offer something.
and then of course, like, we would joke about it too, or like, my taukete, so Fulivai, he's like, we're doing this to lock you here so you can never leave. Like, he would joke to me about it and stuff, but yeah. So the next morning we went out to that island. The ceremony was on one of the outer islands in Vava'u.
Yeah.
And I was given the name Ngahauoma Fakatoukatea o Fokololo o Hau. So the name Ngahauoma Fakatoukatea is the name, and then Fokololo o Hau is the ha'a, or the clan.
Okay.
And that's the clan that Fulivai was in. And then I was installed as a Fakatoutea, or lesser chief, to Fulivai. Yeah. And that was because of our relationship and how we worked hand in hand on a lot of things. And so, yeah, that all happened. And yeah, that was, that was 2017. Yeah, 17 is when I got the title.
Yeah.
And, living in Vava'u, I loved it. Like I said, it was hard sometimes, but it was also great. Like, felt great. I got married. So I came back, I visited home. My wife, who spent her childhood years in Tonga, spent her teenage years in Hawaii, and then kind of like her senior year high school on in Utah. I came home to Utah to visit family and met her through some mutual friends, and then went back to Tonga. We dated long distance. And then when I came back the next time, I proposed. And we got married, and then so I left again after proposing, and then I came back and we got married in April of 2018.
Okay.
And then we moved back to Tonga. But so about the time I got engaged, the king, there's a lot of there's some corruption and stuff going on in Tonga, and so the king actually dissolved the government. He pretty much, he dissolved parliament, everything, so everybody lost their positions, and then there was a re-election. And governors aren't elected, but they're appointed.
Yeah. And
so when the new government came into place, they appointed a different governor from Fulivai. So kind of all the work I was doing as an intern there, or the governor's personal assistant, that all ended. I ran my youth group for about a year and a half, and I realized that while the Boy Scout model was good, it was something I liked, it didn't really give them what they needed, because we do activities on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and if they didn't come to my house every other day, you know what I mean, I would find them, mihi hatosi, like huffing glue or gasoline or doing whatever they could to get high. And I realized that
I want to ask you, is that because I haven't been to Tonga the islands in a while. Is that something that's like prevalent now in the islands, with all the like drugs and kids trying to get high?
Yeah, I think Vava'u and the outer islands aren't as bad as Tonga Tapu, especially when it comes to like ice and stuff. Like, I haven't seen any ice, or we haven't seen that really in Vava'u. And because Vava'u is so small, the community does a pretty decent job at keeping it out. To whereas Tonga Tapu is a lot bigger, and people can get away with more stuff there. But as far as like the youth, like I said, they have nothing to do. You lack stimulation. So any drug use is due to a lack of mental stimulation. And so it's like, if you don't have a hobby, if you don't have a passion, if you don't have something to do, your brain is literally just like going nuts, kind of. And one of the ways to appease that is by getting high or getting drunk.
Okay. I feel like I just want to ask you, is you think it was somebody came and introduced it? Because for me, it's really hard, because when I was in Tonga, when I grew up in Tonga, we just played around. We just, our parents didn't really manage us. We were just running around, playing fun. So it's just kind of, for me, it's kind of foreign for me to hear that. For them not knowing what to do, they have to resort. I guess maybe, is it the people that
teenage?
Is it?
So it's mostly teenage kids. Kind of like 14 to 25.
Yeah.
It's kind of the range that you find it mostly in. Um,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
it's difficult to, because I mean when you get older you start to want to do different things, you know what I mean? And so it's like in Vava'u, you could play volleyball or you could go play rugby or you could go to the bush and farm.
Yeah.
But if you like, those were pretty much the only hobbies
Yeah.
really prevalently available to everybody, right? Like maybe some people, their uncle was a mechanic and they could go help him out or something, or like,
Yeah.
but largely there was just they didn't well, Vava'u doesn't have a lot of things like, you know, like our high school, you know, there's always a club, there's always a sport, there's always, you know, growing up we went to the gym, like we went,
Yeah.
did other things, and a lot of that just doesn't exist down there. And so and part of it might be introduced, like in the 10 years, let's see, 2010 was when I first went there. Yeah, in about the 10-11 years since I've been down there, things have changed a lot.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's due to everybody has a cell phone now, right? Everybody has a
Okay.
smartphone. Everybody
Internet.
has access to internet. Everybody loves music videos, particularly like, you know, hip hop and different things are big down there. And I'm not saying this is the cause.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't really know particularly, but you see a lot of kids trying to act like, you know,
Yes.
just like people do in music videos,
Yeah.
or, you know, like what they see in movies.
Yeah.
And that's the cool thing, right? That's the
Yeah.
whatever.
Got you. Got you.
Which isn't reality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I don't know, but I mean, in a lot of especially hip hop music videos, you see stacks of money on the table and smoke in the room and bottles and you know what I mean? And like, and all of that imagery, like kids have access to that on their phones.
Yeah.
You know, as well as everything else that you could access on your phone, right?
Yeah.
And that's like the cool thing. That's what the rich, you know, who they see as rich or who they see as successful people, that's what they're seeing them do. And so that may have some aspect of it, like they're trying to replicate that. But then again, I don't know particularly what kind of people we've done some surveys on it, just, you know, people experiencing depression, suicide, and then also substance abuse, and what they think might combat that, like what they think might help that. And a lot of them just said if they had, you know, more things to do, more activities, like so like that, like the youth. So whenever we had an activity night, and we did everything, like we would do service projects, but we'd also, like, there was a guy who was in the U.S. military. He was in Vava'u living there, and he came and he taught the kids like some MMA stuff, like jiu-jitsu stuff, and they loved that. We went, like, I got another guy, I think he's American as well. He had a sailboat, and I was friends with him, and I was like, hey, can we take your sailboat out? And so he would take the boys out on a sailboat, and we would learn about sailing, you know what I mean, and different things like that. We got together and, like, we would do cooking stuff, like, and then granted, everybody in Tonga knows how to fei haka, like all the boys know how to, you know how to fei haka, do the basic stuff. But we would make curries or make soups or make these different things, and even though some of them knew how, and it's not like a new thing, but it was like, you know, it was pretty cool to get together to cook food just for them to eat, to have fun, not necessarily they have to get up and fei haka for their family. Just little activities, whatever we could come up with. I taught them how to tie knots and ropes, like other Boy Scout stuff. They really enjoyed that. But and for some reason, again, I don't know exactly why, but any night that we didn't have an activity or they didn't have anything to do, generally, a lot of them, not all of them, but my group in particular, I invited boys who had either been kicked out of school or dropped out, or, you know, they were more at risk. Those are the boys that I invited for the pilot group, and I had about 15 boys. Up for that stuff, and because it gave them something to do, you know what I mean? And I think that's the biggest part, is like, everybody kind of needs something to do, something to stimulate, you know, to stimulate your brain. And if you don't have something stimulating your brain, then there's a substance that will stimulate your brain.
Wow.
And so,
yeah, I haven't been to Tonga. I think I came here to America in 2001, 2002. So my memories of Tonga is just before social media, before the internet.
Yeah.
It was just.
How old were you at the time when you moved up here?
I think I came here. I was like 10 years old. I think it was 10 or 11. So, I know I do hear stories not only from you, but I do hear stories from other people that are currently living in Tonga. But to hear that, for me, it's just like to hear kids not knowing what to do outside in the islands.
Yeah.
Right. Because for me, we just ran around, played, hide and seek, and we just figured out something to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, social media has definitely, and the internet has definitely played a big part of that. Yeah. It's just for me to listen to, as you were talking about it, I was just I was just thinking about my own memories and just see that the big culture shift in Tonga now. And how it's evolved, a transition to where it's at now. So it's just it's crazy as I'm just thinking about it.
Yeah. And something else to consider also be like that teenage. So childhood is, I think, is a great childhood is to have in Tonga, because you do have that outdoors, and it's very, as a child, like the children never have a problem coming up and playing with stuff. It's just like you have that imagination, you have that stuff. But as for teenagers, particularly in the outer islands, but even, perhaps is the case too in Tonga Tapu.
Talk about when they reach adolescence. That's when.
Yeah. When they reach that point, and that happens a lot to like teenagers. Like when we get older, we want to do different things. Mm-hmm. We want to kind of expand. We want to do more difficult things. Mm-hmm. And so I wonder if that's a part of it. But anyway,
yeah.
With I did that, and I realized the kids needed somewhere to go every day.
Yeah.
So my current goal is to build an actual like teen center that has a gym, has a computer lab, has like an art studio place. So that's what I want to do. And, there are like kind of some local youth leaders back there in Tonga that I want to help do that or do that with them. And then another big part of it is just I want to create business because, people need jobs. People need to provide for their families. Yeah. Right now, Tonga's economy relies heavily on remittances, which is people sending money back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you come up here and work and send money back to your mom or that kind of stuff. And while that's a valuable part of the culture, it's for today's economic systems, it's actually very damaging.
Yeah.
Because you send the money back to your friend in Tonga, and then they go buy food at the Chinese store, and the money goes back to China or back to wherever,
Yeah.
So whereas like Tonga is kind of just this conjugate, like money's coming from overseas into it, but then money's also leaving, going back overseas to wherever it is.
They're not creating their own economy.
Yeah, and so in order for something to and that's not growing. That's why you can't really remittance will only grow if you have more people sending you money.
Yeah,
but you want something that grows on its own, it's self-sustaining.
Yep.
And so one of my goals. So we came back to the United States just before the pandemic, and my wife is finishing school, and so we're gonna be here until she finishes school. And then we plan on going back and continuing those things. And then she has her own goals as well. Even though she, spent most of her life about half her life or so up in America, she's always wanted to go back and live and work there. And so that's where we plan on going back and having our family. And she wants to be involved in the education systems there. Working in education and doing things there. And then I want to be more on that, business aspect of things, and as well as youth work, and kind of just, teaching entrepreneurship to young people so they can run their own businesses in Tonga. Because that's very mentally stimulating. It's very fun to make a sale. It's very fun to create something. And so that's kind of where we're at now. And just in the meantime, that's why I started the podcast I'm currently doing, the Tongan Legends podcast, and the Instagram page. I kind of started that because while I'm here in America, I can't do stuff in Tonga. Like, I can prepare to go back. But I also know a lot of, so while my goal is to empower, the youth in Tonga, I also know a lot of my friends that I grew up with, they want to know about the history and the legends and the language and all the stuff that they didn't really have the opportunity to learn about. And so that's why me with Ulisse Funaki, my co-host on the podcast, that's why we're doing the Tongan Legends podcast, is because it helps. I don't know if it helps or not, but we're just trying to spread it to our kainga, our friends up here in Muli, who grew up the most of their lives or all their lives in America, maybe not speak Tongan, maybe not know the history, because I believe, and I know that Ulisse believes, that like and even my mom, like I said, my family's very big into heritage and ancestry. My mom recently shared a study that talked about people who knew their ancestry, or kids who knew their ancestry, did a lot better in life. And it's just being more rooted in who you are and your identity and all that. It actually does help you.
Definitely.
But
helps in your confidence. It helps in your like self-esteem and your confidence as an individual.
Yeah,
absolutely. Because I remember I did watch a study that I think that, like, as human beings, we're social creatures. Like, we have to figure out our place in society. That's a natural way of, like, that's what we do as people. And the animals do it. We have to do it as well. And if you don't know your place in society, your role in life, your purpose, or what you're supposed to do, like what you're willing, like why did God create you to give it back to the world? And that's where all these people feel anxiety, feel lost, or whatever. So it's really, really important to know where you at. And where you come from. I do want to ask you, because I think that's one of the things that I was very interested in having on the podcast. As you mentioned, that knowing your roots. I wanted to ask you, because I did go on your Instagram page and checked out your videos and your podcast. I do, if you don't mind, can you share can you share the pillars? And I know I saw you called it like the Gabe Gola. Because I know there's a lot of Polynesians that watch my podcast. A lot of them, they were born in America. Some of the most Polynesians that grew up here may not have a full understanding of their history, their culture, especially Tongans. A lot of Tongans don't know the language. So I wanted to give it an opportunity to share that with them, so they can know more about their history and the pillars that you mentioned in your on your podcast, which you mentioned. You called it the Gabe Gola, the pillars. So if you don't mind, can you talk about that?
No problem. And just as a side note, first, real quick here, any of you guys who want to know more about that stuff, or continually want to gain that knowledge, there's some other people who I think are very much more significant than me, who share things like that. One of them being Frederica Tuita. She is a princess. She's a member of the royal family, and she's on Instagram. But I think she shares more of the cultural stuff on Twitter. And I think that's a great resource for any of you who want to learn more about this. And I think she actually wrote a blog about the Kave Gola, and it's because one of her ancestors, Tauwhahau Tupo I, I believe, was the one who kind of coined the term and kind of set it as a standard for all Tongans, even though aspects of it existed previous to him or previous to his reign. He's the one who kind of really set it into place, I believe. I may be mistaken, but check out Frederica's page. Her Royal Highness Frederica Tuloat. Sorry, I'm being, when I speak English, I feel like I'm so disrespectful, but all respect to her and her family and the knowledge that she possesses and shares. She's a great resource. But just a real, kind of a quick I guess, overview of them would be, there are 4 particular ones, and then there's another one that kind of gets thrown in there. But the 4 particular ones are Lototo, or Loto Fakatoutea Lalo, which is humility, right? Loto means your heart, to is to fall, or kind of like having that lowliness of heart. being not being proud or vain or things like that.
Yeah.
Another one is whiwhi tokaiaki or whiwhi tokaiaki, which the common word for that would be whakaapa or respect. In this sense, I feel like it talks more about the respect for position. But the whiwhi tokaiaki, so whe and naki mean mutual.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a sense, it's mutual respect. You're respecting that person's position, they're respecting your role, kind of thing. And at the same time, so in the word whakaapa, apa is kind of the root word of that. Apa is like reverence. So the word to be reverent is apasia. Sia is to be full of, or it's a lasting sense of something. So whakaapa in this sense means to have reverence for or show respect, to be like, so apa or apai or something like that is more like polite, quiet, sort of thing.
Okay.
So whakaapa actually means to show a reverence sort of respect towards someone. Toka is to respect someone else's point of view, kind of thing. So, but in this sense, we use both words, or most people, I've heard them use them interchangeably, whakaapa or whiwhi tokaiaki. Interestingly, I've heard, I don't remember exactly where, pretty sure it's from a solid source though, might have been from Tevita Okaili. He's a doctor of anthropology, also another great resource if you guys follow him on social media. But the whiwhi tokaiaki actually might have Fijian roots. It might actually be a Fijian word. Mm-hmm. So see, we have lototo, whiwhi tokaiaki, mamahi'i mea is mamahi is pain. Yeah, mamahi is like to cause or feel pain, the interaction of pain, and mea is thing, right? But that literally means to me the phrase down for the cause comes to mind.
Mamahi mea. Okay.
When I think of mamahi mea, I think of like someone who is for the cause, someone who's willing to be in pain or go through the painstaking things to
got you.
Be a part of something, you know what I mean? So a part of it could be like Shamwe, so Vava'u, who's as far as Balangis go, he's probably the best source for language. He's the one who wrote the intensive course in Tongan, but he describes it as like a team spirit. So it's that in Hawaiian, or people who know Hawaiian culture, it'd be like laulima, like many hands, right? Coming together, working together, kind of thing is what mamahi mea.
Would it be like sacrifice, like team sacrifice, or no? No, that's not the word.
Possibly. Sacrifice plays a role in all of these things, I believe. But you're willing to, sacrifice your own time, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Be a part of that group, that team. Be you're building a house or clearing a field, or even participating in a Kava ceremony, taking your place there.
Yeah.
I believe it has to do with that. Again, if anybody look up Frederica's information on that'd be great. And then the last official kave gola is tauhi vaha'a. Tauhi means to keep or take care of.
Yeah.
Like shopkeep in Tongan is tauhi whare koloa, or and then vaha'a or vaha'a means space.
Yep.
But another word for va is also space, but it can mean the relationship between you and another person.
Yeah.
And so that one is, keeping up relationships is what it is. And this is very, very apparent in Tongan society. Everybody goes to the family functions, your third cousin's getting married, you're there, right? Like my dad. So we just got back from Seattle because there was a wedding there, and then I was in Hawaii as well, but there was a wedding. My wife and I were in Hawaii, and there was a wedding while we were down there. And so I was like, within 2 weeks there's 2 weddings, and my dad was kind of making a joke, and he's like, the greatest thing about having a family your size is that there's a wedding every week you get to go to. And then we went to a wedding last night for a friend of hers, and so it's kind of like, showing up to family functions, keeping good relationships, not just by showing up, that's a part of it, but also by keeping the peace is a big thing.
Okay.
And so, and then the add-on one, which Shumway adds in his videos, and if you guys haven't looked up his documentaries on YouTube, that'd be a very good thing to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I think this one he talks about, it's probably the Kava Heka. So Kava Heka talks about the Kava stuff, and Kava is very much integrated into the culture.
Yeah.
When he mentions the pillars of Tongan society, he lists 5 of them. So the 4 I already listed, and then Ngahauoma, which is a loving nature.
Yeah, loving nature.
It's a love and like that. But yeah, that's essentially what they are, and they all kind of play this role of having having a good society. It's kind of like if you think about the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments teach us how to do 2 things: to love God and to love our neighbor. It's like we love our neighbor by not coveting what he has, by not stealing, by not cheating, by not killing, right? The Kave Gola teach people how to live in a good society. There's a saying, there's a Hawaiian saying, and I've heard people use it across the Pacific, but I'm pretty sure the original saying I heard was from one of my Hawaiian mentors, and it goes heva'a he moku heva'a. In Tongan, it'd be like koe waka, koe motu, koe waka. Meaning the boat is an island and the island is a boat.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about that, what it's saying is the way you live on a boat is how you should live on an island. When you're on a boat, if you don't do everything right, you're going to die.
Yeah.
Right? You could get lost, whatever. So on a boat, there's a captain. You listen to the captain. If there's more than one captain, it starts problems, and you guys get in a fight and kill half the crew, then you don't have enough people to run the boat. Then you die.
Yeah.
So listen to the leadership. Have respect for that leadership. You know what I mean? As the captain, he needs to be a good captain and take care of his crew. Otherwise, they're going to throw him overboard, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's part of that whakaapapa. That's part of that tauhiwa, right? On a boat, everybody needs to have their strength. There's always rationing on a boat. Everybody shares everything, right? So that's part of that anga'ofa. That's part of that tauhiwa there, like sharing things, mamahi mea, being a team, working together.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I just blanked out on the last one. Was it lototo, and then lototo being humble? You know, like you have to be humble both. Yeah. And they all kind of, like I said, they all kind of they all are related to each other. They all play off each other. But essentially, like if you're on a boat, if you're not humble, if you're not, you know, taking care of your crewmates, if you're not rationing things, if you're not sharing, you know what I mean? If you have bad blood with anybody, it's a boat. A boat is a very small place. Same thing. Islands aren't that big, you know, sometimes. You have to keep good relationships with people. You can't afford to be at war constantly because then you'll wipe out your entire island. There's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to go. You know, you look at anyway, I won't go off on a tangent about that, but these pillars of society are kind of the guidelines of having a healthy community that works together and that thrives. And that's what you need, especially because I mean, my ancestors, we were always at war. I mean, everybody's ancestors was at war at some point in time, but like in Europe, if you didn't like someone, you could just go 300 miles away. You know what I mean? Yeah. You can walk for a couple of days and get away from them. In Tonga, you can walk from one end of the island.
Right? Yeah.
And so it's like you can't just walk away. You know, the only way to get away from someone is to build a boat, go on a voyage, and that takes a lot of skill, a lot of effort, and a lot of preparation. So you can kind of see how both the physical environment, you know, being on, because everybody who came to the islands came on a boat. Mm-hmm. And so you see how being on that boat shaped their society and the culture they had. Once they got on the island, being on the island, you know, shapes your society, and that's how you have to live. In order to survive, in order to have a prosperous civilization, you have to live by a certain set of rules. And it just so happens that these are the rules that were mostly needed for the society. That's my belief. That's my viewpoint on it. But yeah, that's what the Kave Gola essentially is kind of like that. They're just rules of being a good neighbor, rules of being a good part of your society.
Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, because I know for personally, for a lot of people, they don't really know their history. They don't know the pillars I loved how you explained it in detail because nobody growing up and nobody explained those pillars to me, which is something that was just something you just experienced, right?
Yeah.
I don't even remember anybody breaking it down. This is what you need to do, but I just remember just when you watch what's the Tongan word, the ulunganga, you just watch how people behave, and you know, okay, this is how we do it. This is how we love. This is how we respect. It wasn't verbally communicated. It wasn't verbally communicated to you. It was just shown through you through behavior, and you just learned it as a child. So it was pretty, for me, it was interesting to hear it verbally, because nobody, for me, nobody, I think for most Polynesians, nobody really taught them the pillars. It's something you just learn from your parents and from watching everybody else. So I do have a question for you. I think that because I know you mentioned that one of the things that you're really passionate about is empowering and helping kids and helping people to reach their full potential. That's something I'm really passionate about also. Not only being a Tongan myself, I'm always trying to encourage and uplift all people, but especially my Tongan people, because that's my home. That's where I came from. I want to ask you, because you have a lot of experience working with Tongans and you saw the culture. What is stopping Tongans from reaching their potential? I have my perspective and my thoughts on it based on my own personal experience. But I'm very interested to hear from you because you have an outside perspective because you're coming from outside the culture, but you also know the culture as well.
Yeah.
So in your personal experience dealing with Polynesians, dealing with Tongans, what is really stopping Tongans from taking the next level, from being an entrepreneur, for starting a business, or pursuing an education, trying something new? Like, we have all these pillars that we learn, which is great, on how we treat each other, but there's something that's stopping us and from taking that next step of elevating ourselves to a higher level. And I want to ask you, what's your thoughts on that?
This is a really difficult question. For multiple reasons. One, you're correct. Like I have an outside perspective.
Yeah.
And while I've been privileged and blessed to have many good friends who have accepted me into the culture, and not view me as differently, at the same time, I'm not a Tongan and I don't have that experience. You know what I mean? And so it could be, and it's everybody. I mean, opinions are easy. Everybody, judgment's easy. Everybody sits back. But for me, I find it really difficult to kind of answer that question because I don't know. I talk to friends. I have friends and I can empathize and I do my best to understand, where people have been and what they're going through. But at the same time, I don't really know. And on the other hand, while I have been accepted into the culture by, many people and been shown that love, which I'm very, very grateful for, it's kind of like, I feel like the neighbor kid, you know what I mean? Like while we're close and we're cool and everything, I'm not, and in some aspects I am a part of the family, but in others, like, I wouldn't come into someone else's family and tell them how their family needs to go. You know what I mean? And so I'm also at the same time, while I find it very difficult in and of itself to answer that question, I also don't know if it's my place to.
Oh, you're Mata Pule, man.
Nah,
you have a place already.
Yeah. That's just in Hunga. That's just on Fulivai's island. I just have to do what he tells me to do over there. I don't think anything that's holding Tongans back. Well, in some aspects, it is unique to Tongans in Tonga.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I don't think it's unique. We're all human beings. We all have the same emotions. We all have the same basic needs. We all struggle with certain things in different things in different ways. One thing I will say is that every weakness is a strength that's overplayed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what holds many people back. for example, perfectionism, being really good at something is really good. Being, or setting high standards for yourself is a really good thing.
Yeah.
But going to the point, if you play that strength too much, high standards is a strength, but having too high of standards becomes a weakness. Yeah. Because it limits you from accomplishing things because things won't be perfect. You know what I mean? It's the same thing with the humor. Being able to laugh at yourself, being able to talk and everything, that's a strength. That's a very, very good thing. Having too much of that might cause insensitivity towards yourself or towards others. Could cause, sometimes there's a lot of self-abasement or self-hate, right? Mm-hmm. So that strength of being able to laugh and being able to to joke and not take yourself seriously, that can become a weakness if it's overplayed, right? The family relations things, that's a huge, that's a great thing. That there's a Harvard class on wellness that my wife's in right now that she gets to take through her university. It's an online class, but it talks about family connections are one of the biggest keys to happiness there is out there. Mm-hmm. And if you look at Tongan, I was talking to someone recently, and I was always so surprised at how quickly Tongans recovered from the death of a loved one. Mm-hmm. If someone's in a lot of Palangi cultures or whatever, it's like if someone's loved one died, you have like a 1 hour funeral, maybe you have like a little feed afterwards, everybody goes home, and then that person who's hurting, they go home, to just themselves. Like if you're an old lady and your husband died or something, you pretty much go home. Maybe you have a child come visit you every now and then, but it's like you have 1 hour of mourning and 1 hour of family connection. Mm-hmm. And then most of that goes away. Mm-hmm. And you're left to deal with those emotions for the rest, for however long it takes you to process them. And this is just my own theory. Again, this is all my own opinion. But like when you have hundreds of people come together for a week or two at a time, all mourning with you, all having that connection, it's almost like you're carrying a burden. You get to spread it out across those, hundreds of people who are there to carry that burden with you. Mm-hmm. That's an amazingly beautiful and wonderful thing. And I wonder if that's why I've seen a lot of my friends who've suffered the loss of loved ones, like granted, it still hurts, like you still miss them. You can't take that pain away. But compared to what I've seen from, Palangis who go through the same thing, the Polynesians are able to process it much quicker and are able to work through it much quicker than the Palangis. And again, like I said, it's just my own personal observations. But that's that family relations things, that's awesome. And that's a great strength. But at the same time, sometimes family relations get abused. Sometimes you don't hold boundaries that you need to hold because of the aspect of holding family relations. Sometimes you let your parents, and this doesn't just happen in Tongan culture, it'll happen in any culture.
Yes.
A specific example. But sometimes, letting your parents dictate what you do and how you live your life, or what you do for a living or thing like that.
Yeah.
And that makes you miserable because you're not really doing anything you care about or love. And then there's some family members too. There's good and bad in every culture and every people, and some people take advantage. There's always people taking advantage of other people. And sometimes this family aspect thing I've seen, and again, this is all my own opinion, but I've seen how some family members use it to take advantage of other family members.
Yeah.
And so that's like that strength that you have. If you do it too much, it can become a weakness. Mm-hmm. And so I wouldn't, again, and like I said, I don't necessarily know if it's my place to chime in on this conversation because I'm not going to tell someone else, I think it's an important conversation for the Tongan community to have and figure out. But I would just point out the fact to just be very self-aware and pay attention to your strengths and your weaknesses, because every weakness is a strength that's being overplayed. And then it's just learning balance. Every individual needs to learn to find balance within themselves, because healthy individuals make healthy families. Healthy families make healthy societies. You know what I mean? And that's just the way I see it, at least. But I think that's something everybody needs to do. And then So for Tongans, it's just like look at your own life and see how that applies to you. See that how it applies to your culture things. I don't think that I've heard a lot of people, or especially like, sometimes old people will joke and they'll be like, oh, marry a palangi so you don't have to deal with the kavenga, marry a palangi so you don't have to deal with all this stuff.
Yeah.
That's not the solution. Marry whoever you love. I'm not saying it's good or bad to marry whoever, but the solution is not to run away from this stuff. The solution is to find balance in it. Yeah. Because you shouldn't run away from who you are. You shouldn't run away from what you love and what you believe. Recently, oh shucks, I just forgot that. Dang, I just blanked. I knew the name and I knew the organization, and I just blanked on both of them. It used to be Tongan Youth Leaders. It's like TTL now or something. Tonga Take the Lead. Okay, so there's an organization run by Elizabeth Kite, and they had a really, really great program recently where they interviewed one of the matriarchs of Tongan culture. And again, like I said, there's a lot of really great resources out there. But something that she said was that anytime we're performing a cultural responsibility or a cultural practice and it's becoming a burden and it's something that's making things worse, then we're not performing it correctly. We're not doing it.
Was that Below Levels? Who said that? Was that video?
It was not that one. She does talk about aspects of the Fahu system like that, but that's another. It's a similar one. It's a great reference as well.
Yeah.
But I really loved, and I'm kind of upset with myself for not knowing the name. But essentially, like, it was very eloquent. In Tongan, it was very eloquently put. The English translation was okay, but I feel like a lot of times, things sound better in Tongan if it's on a Tongan subject because the language is created for those things, right? Mm-hmm. But it was like anytime, these cultural practices become, fakakina, or become like a bothersome. Yeah, and we're not doing it correctly, because going to your family's thing and giving money shouldn't be like, oh, I have to go give these people money and there's arguing and stuff like that. It shouldn't be like that. It's an opportunity to show up, to build connection, to feel love, and to share your love. You know what I mean? And that's why I say, you need to find balance in your strengths, because if you do it too much, if you're doing it out of obligation, then it can feel like a burden. And like, at the same time, you need to be humble. Some people and they're too embarrassed to not give anything, even though they can't afford to give anything, because you know what I mean? Yeah. One of the kave goal is to be humble, to have that lototo, to not be worried about, trying to be all fia paipa and stuff like that. Yeah. And so, like, if you're truly living the culture, these things shouldn't be a burden. Say, hey, I don't have much to give, but I can give my time. I'm showing up and trying to be here and trying to be supportive, even though I can't show up with $1,000 right now, kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, I probably said too much anything, but I think definitely that video, ko me'ana below level what she said. I think that's a great reference. Also, this recent talk. It's not the Ofaki Tonga. Ofaki Tonga is another. They're having some good talks. They had one with Frederico, which is really good. But yeah, the TTL. I would go look up there and read about that meeting and the stuff that was said there, because these are some great guidelines towards, like, to be, I don't know, I guess, to feel, just to feel comfortable in who you are and what you're doing, and not have it be, something like that. And that's something I need to work on myself too, both within my wife's culture, Tongan culture, and the culture I've been a part of or accepted into for a while, but then also within my own culture. But yeah, I guess that's my views on that. Again, and like I said, I don't feel like I'm in any position to tell Tongan the Tongan society, whichever it is, be it diasporic wide or the Utah Tongan society or whatever.
Yeah.
How to live or what to do. Like that's not my place. But I just would encourage everybody to find balance and live the best of your strengths and don't let them become weaknesses.
No, appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. I respect it. I wanted to go into it, but I understand where you come from.
Yeah.
Even though I could have endorsed you and just give you my blessing. But I completely understand it. No problem. I do want to ask you because the one thing I love about you is that you have a lot of history about the Tongan. Like I don't even have. I just learned about the 4 pillars today. I do want to ask you, as far as legends, that's the one thing I do realize for a lot of Tongans, they don't know the history of where the Tongan kings came from, or where I remember in Tonga like learning about like Ngahauoma.
Yeah.
So are you familiar with those legends, with the kings and where we came from? Yeah. So I want to ask you if you can talk about that, because I do know I have sometimes have conversation with kids and like literally, and for me personally, like I literally have zero knowledge about like the kings, the Ho'ikis, like how did this all originate and become? How did the Tongan culture become in fruition? Like where did it come from? And I just want to know as much as what do you know so far, and as much as knowledge you have, if you can just share that with everybody. I just want to give everybody as much knowledge with that we may not be aware of. Yeah.
So I think, talking about culture, I think it's important to realize sometimes when people say my culture, they think of a snapshot of what happened 200 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like my culture is a warrior culture. If you're not going to war on a regular basis,
yeah.
Culture is what you live and do every day.
Yeah.
And so to say when the culture started is
I guess a better way to say it was ancestry. Can you
talk
about not culture. Yeah.
When the ancestry started. So the anybody who wants to really learn about that, I would check out our podcast, the Tongan Legends podcast, because we essentially that's all we talk about.
Yeah.
Because it really started, the people who first showed up in what is now considered Tonga and how that language developed and how that society developed. That's how that kind of culture started. And there's interesting things we see in the legends, like where common man came from, where the royal people came from, where women came from. You know what I mean? Like it all plays into culture today and how culture today is run. And so if you haven't, just to any of the listeners, if you guys haven't checked out the Tongan Legends podcast, I would check those things out, because they go into we talk about where women come from and how it relates to the Fahu system today. You know what I mean? We talk about where men came from and how it relates to the commoner situation today, or in recent history. We have talked about kind of where the chiefly class comes from. We're actually going to get into the Ngahauoma story in the next episode. Well, actually, I'm sitting on 2 episodes right now. I'm really horrible at posting. Like I'm really, really bad at social media. But I have 1 episode. I'll probably post it here in the next day or 2. And then another one I'm working on editing that hopefully will be up in about a week. But so whereas we go in and we talk about all those things. The Ngahauoma story, which will come next after those 2 get posted, essentially comes from synopsis, a short story, like long story short. Tangaloa, who's one of the higher ranking gods, or one of the Tangaloas. There's many Tangaloas. Tangaloa Etumatupua, I think, is the one. He comes down to earth, has a child with Ilaheva, or Vaipopua, who is a mortal woman. And she has a son who she names Ngahauoma, which is like, his name means like the coming of the day or something like that, or a new day or something like that. When Ngahauoma gets older, he's like, hey, who's my dad? He wants to find out who his father is. She tells him who he is and that he has to climb a giant toa tree to go up there. So he goes up there. He meets his fathers. His brothers get jealous and they kill him. They eat him, or they eat him and throw his head in a bush. And then their father comes and is like, "Hey, where's your brother?" And they're like, "Oh, we don't know." And he knows they're lying, of course, right? So he has them all buaki lua throw up the body into a kumete, and then they cover the kumete with la'i nonu, the noni leaves. And then after a period of time, his body reforms, and they pull his head out of the bush and throw it in there too. His body reforms, and he goes back to Earth. And when he goes back to Earth, the brothers who killed him, as a part of their punishment, some say they feel bad and they want to serve. Others say that they're punished and they're forced to serve. Either way, they're serving kind of thing. They come back and they start the Falefa, which are the 4 original clans that served the Tu'i Tonga. So Aho Etu becomes the first Tu'i Tonga, or king of all Tonga. And that's the start of, he's the highest ranking chief.
Yeah, chief, yep.
We call king, I guess, there's different stations, lesser kings, higher kings, chiefs, or higher chiefs. And so from the Tu'i Tonga, we go down the line. You have the Tu'i Tonga was a religious figure and a political figure. Eventually, there was some, discord or whatnot. And they said, how about you just do the religious stuff, and then we'll start. There's another kingly line. And I don't remember if it's through one of the Tu'i Tonga's sisters or through one of his brothers, where they started the Tu'i Kanukupolu, I think.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've talked about this or read about it, so forgive me.
Yeah.
But then that's when another, kingly line starts. And the Tu'i Kanukupolu was kind of like the political leader of the time. And then that came through. We had another kingly line, the Tu'i Hatakalawa. Off the top of my head, I don't remember. I'm trying to see where they broke off. I'd have to go back and read or look or find out. But if Funaki was here, he can answer it all for you. He's really great. Also, go follow Ulise Funaki on your social media platforms. Yeah. He's always sharing and posting things with Tongan and Hawaiian history and culture and current events. But so then those kingly lines start there. That all got kind of thrown into chaos during the Tongan Civil War, which took place at about the time of colonization. It was post First Contact. So First Contact happened, and then about 100 years later, this kind of great civil war started that lasted for a generation or two. And at the end of that civil war, Tau who wasn't actually, he had some claims to some of the thrones. He's connected to all of them, of course, like most of the chieftain class are connected. But he, through his skill as a general, as a war leader, and also he was he was an impressive guy. Like, he was just, when you read about him, he's one of those people in history who I would love to meet, because of just what he accomplished, but also you can read something like he became a preacher near the end of his life, and gave some great sermons, and did some amazing things. But he reunited all of Tonga, pretty much got all the different chiefs and everyone to come under his rule, and then he started the current king dynasty, which we're under. And so that name, when he became Christian, he took the name of George Tupo. George, being his Christian name, his baptized name, Tupo was actually the name of one of the chiefs that he, I guess, might have been a mentor to him, would be the best way to put it. That Tupo was I don't remember if he converted to Christianity or he's just favorable towards Christianity. And he's kind of the one that led Taufa'ahau to eventually convert to Christianity through the missionary Pitavi. And so then that's the current king line we're in. So Tupo Uluraki, or Tupo the First, George Tupo the First, and we're currently on King Tupo the Sixth. So,
thank you. Thanks for the short story.
the full version will be out soon. Go ahead and check out the Tongan Legends podcast. But I would encourage everybody to check out those early episodes, especially the creation story, because it's really amazing how much of Tongan culture and society started way, way, way back then, and is still very much alive and well today.
Yeah, if you're watching this, I'll definitely make sure I'll have the link. I'll have the link for your podcast, and I'll put it underneath this video when I do post it, so people can just click on it and go directly to your podcast. But definitely check it out. Yeah, especially if you're watching this and you don't know your history and you want to learn more about your ancestry, it's really entertaining. And also, if you need help in your Tongan language, yeah, it's also practice. What do you say when your Tongan's not really good? So Fakatoutea. Is that what do you say?
Yeah, Movil,
Yeah,
Mahil.
Ngahauoma there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mahil is probably the.
Yeah, if you're talking to Hill right now, you need to go watch his podcast.
Yeah.
The last thing I just want to ask you real quick, because I know this is something that a lot of women ask all the time, and they want to know is like the Vava'u system. Where did that originate from? And I don't know if you're on TikTok, but probably not. But
No, not yet.
Like I see all these videos of these girls like talk about how the Vava'u system came by or like, how it's supposed to be done. So there's all these like variety of opinions of where did it come from. So nobody knows what like the real answer, but I'd love to hear from you like the origin of the Vava'u system and how they came about.
There's no like definite answer for that I know of.
Yeah.
But one of the theories we discuss in the podcast is the original Tongan family, which would be the gods. So you have Hikuleo, who's a big sister, and then you have the Tangaloas, who are her younger, like her first set of brothers, and the Mauis, or actually they're cousins, but brothers, same thing. And so the first time we really see that relationship between brother and sister is with that origin story with Hikuleo. And she was revered like a very powerful goddess, very sacred. The biggest ceremony, the Inasi, which was actually oversawn by the Tu'itonga, who was Tangaloa's descendant, right? But all of that was for Hikuleo. So bringing her, those gifts kind of thing that we see in Tongan culture today. So yeah, I don't know what's out there on TikTok. I haven't seen any of that yet. Maybe I'll have to go check it out. But yeah, that's the first time we see it is actually in the origin story, or we see what could have been or what resembles the Vava'u system of today.
System.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, because it'd be a good thing you're not on TikTok. You probably look and see that content like, what the hell is going on with our kids today?
I know some of it. It's good to have fun. I think TikTok's doing well because everything's so serious, and it's good to see people just messing around sometimes.
Yeah. So I guess we've come to the end of the podcast. I've come to the end of the podcast. Just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing, especially for me. The one thing I was very excited for this podcast when you finally got a date booked, which for me was just learning more about my ancestry. And I also really wanted to be able to get you on here because I know personally there's a lot of Tongans out there that just don't know their ancestry, and especially the Hafagasis. So I'm sure you're gonna have a bunch of them soon. but I do. I've one thing I've always heard from a lot of Hafagasi Tongans I know that when they grow up they always have this conflict of self-identity because they couldn't figure out who they are. But once they figured out either they went to Tonga and lived in Tonga for a couple of years, but once they figured out, they learned more about their heritage and their culture. There was a feeling of peace of like they figured out who they are. So that's one of the main reasons I wanted to be on here. And for all those Tongans out there that's watching this, that may not have their parents didn't teach their ancestry, you don't know. At least they can get a little bit from here, but also just let you know, I'm gonna have his link for his podcast on the bottom of this video, so that way you guys can go to his podcast and check him out and watch the full detailed version of. He has a lot of great videos and great content, so it was very educational for me. But in closing, one thing I always ask every guest at the end of the show is to leave some final thoughts, some final words, and we'll close off the podcast with that. So can you just share some final thoughts, final words, some last inspiration to everybody, and then we'll close it off with that.
So as you're talking about heritage there, I mean, heritage is very important to me, and I wonder if a lot of people think, because there's like this. There's some people say like, oh, white people don't have culture or
Yeah, I've heard
heritage or whatever,
that.
and I'm not really saying this, but my knowledge of my ancestry, my heritage, and I didn't really talk about a lot about it, but like it was something I was very much raised in by my grandmother and my father, and my mother as well. um, that is what has allowed me to do what I've done in life.
Yeah.
And I've always loved, growing up a landscaper son or whatever, like, I mentioned before, I've always kind of been fascinated with roots because I learned a lot about roots.
Yeah.
I remember once we were, service project, we're helping a neighbor pull up a tree, and they had cut the tree down, and it was a really big pine tree. But the stump, the stump just looks like how big. And I was like, well, why don't you just hook up your truck and rip it out, right?
Yeah.
Granted, the big stump, and the guy there, he's like, you remember how high that tree went?
Yeah.
And he's like, in order for it to go that high, its roots have to go that far down. Yeah. And that was a lesson that stuck with me, both, when dealing with plants, but also dealing with, we talk about our roots, our ancestry, that's our roots.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to me, your branches can only reach as far as your roots reach deep. And, that meaning, like, the more grounded in who you are is what will give you the foundation, give you the confidence, and allow you to reach far in life. If it weren't for if I didn't know about my strong ancestors who were pioneers, my strong Scottish ancestry who were, captains and generals, even my Cherokee, the little Cherokee I have, colonels, like if I didn't know, even my, Viking ancestry, those guys were some bad dudes. Like, granted, they weren't great. I wouldn't do what they did, but it took a lot of strength. It took a lot of willpower, and it took a lot of, tenacity to accomplish the things that these people accomplished. From as far back as I know my ancestry goes, up until my parents, learning about their stories, is what has given me the strength and confidence, and also the love for stories. So I wouldn't know about all these Tongan stories if I didn't know about my stories. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be as, fascinated in all these things if my parents didn't teach me about, my culture. My grandma didn't teach me about my Scottish ancestry.
Yeah.
And so, like it, I feel like, we talk about it. We all know we love it for some reason.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we ever think about why. And to me, it's when you realize how strong your ancestors were, that is a place where you can draw strength from to overcome the challenges you face today.
Yeah.
And so, that's what I mean by, your branches can only reach as far as your roots reach deep. So, just close with that.